Welcome to Mentoring in Real Life, where we talk about what it takes to find and be a great mentor. I'm Angela, and together with my co-host Bill, we know the power of mentoring and what it can do in your life on both sides of the table. If you're interested in learning tips, tricks, and hearing stories about mentoring, you're in the right place. Come join us. Welcome to Mentoring Real Life. Hey, Bill, how you doing?
Never been this happy. How about you, Angela?
I'm tippy-tappy.
Awesome. Well, so up to this point, our podcast has largely been about focusing on mentoring in the business environment. And we certainly recognize that mentoring has a place in many environments and certainly in life. And so we're going to change it up a little bit with today's podcast. Our guest today is Jeannie Affelder, who happens to be the board chair of Friends of the Children in Chicago. It's an innovative organization focused on youth mentoring. But in addition to being a board chair of this organization, she's a professional actress, a playwright, has been a public radio host, a fellow at the Congressional Research Service. She has a degree from Harvard. She's a wife, a mom, and just happens to be my cousin. So let's face it, she's got a lot of good stuff going on. So without any further ado, welcome to the show, Jeannie. We certainly appreciate you taking the time to share some of your insights and experience. So before we get started, anything you want to add to that introduction?
I think you touched on all of it, and I'm just really happy to be here with you both. Thank you for having me.
Great. Thanks so much. So I've done a little bit of research, but I think it'd be great if you start off by saying, so what is Friends of the Children and what drew you to working with that organization?
Thank you. Friends of the Children is an innovative mentoring program. It was founded in Portland, Oregon 30 years ago by a man named Duncan Campbell, who had a rough childhood and survived a lot of trauma as a child and neglect, and went on to found a business and made money and decided to give back to the community and to found an organization that could provide mentors for kids that had upbringings like his. So the organization started 30 years ago. For the first, I'd say 12 to 15 years, it was only in Portland, Oregon, and then very gradually started founding chapters in other cities, mostly in Southern Oregon and then California, and it spread across the country. The Chicago chapter was founded in 2018, and as of today, there are about 40 sites across the country that provide this innovative model. We are a very unique program. We share a lot in common with the kinds of things you've talked about on your podcast, about creating trust between a mentor and a mentee, about accountability, about goal setting. But we find our mentees when they are kindergartners. So when you are a child, you can join our program when you're between 4 and 6 years old.
So who decides? I mean, is that something the parents decide or the schools decide, or how's that work?
Our executive director likes to refer to it as a reverse draft. That if you are a kindergartner and you have a parent or a caregiver who sees the need for a mentoring program, that's great. We are so happy for you that you've got somebody looking out for you and you can go find a mentoring program. Those are not the kids in our program. The kids in our program are the kids, we look for the kids facing the greatest obstacles. They've experienced the most trauma, the most poverty, the most involvement with guns or gangs or the juvenile justice system or foster care or violence in their community. We're looking for the kids that don't have somebody looking out for them. And we hear about them sometimes through the schools, sometimes through the Department of Children and Family Service, sometimes through foster care. We partner in Chicago with some community violence interrupters, organizations that work with people who are formerly incarcerated. And if those formerly incarcerated people have children, those are the kids we're looking for in our program. So you cannot apply to be in our program. We find the kids.
Okay.
We assign those children a full-time paid professional mentor. So we have taken mentoring out of the volunteer world, and our mentors are paid professionals. This is their full-time job. Each mentor in our program has 8 mentees. So each mentor has 8 kids in their program. When we first launched, we started with 3 mentors and 24 kids. So each of those mentors had 8 kids, and they would see those kids for 4 hours a week, sometimes in school. There's some schools that will permit us to have the mentor in the classroom with the child for an hour a day or a couple of hours a week. We see those kids in the community, and we see them at home. So each mentor is spending 4 hours a week with each child, and then the rest of their 40-hour a week is about training, is about data collection, accountability issues, preparation time, stuff like that, group activities. So we have unusual kids, we have unusual mentors, and we commit for the long term. When we take a child into our program, take a kindergartner into our program, after lots of trust building with their parents and their caregivers, because not everybody wants a stranger coming into their family system.
Sure.
We commit to those kids for 12 and a half years, no matter what. There is nothing the child can do that will get them kicked out of our program, that we are there for the long haul until the 12 and a half years. So if you start at 6, we're there until you graduate high school.
That's extraordinary. I mean, in those environments, you can imagine not everybody always has a perfect set of life experiences.
Right. Exactly. And that's the point. If the child, our families are very transient. They move around a lot. Housing is a big issue. Low-income housing is a huge issue in most cities, particularly in Chicago. So our families move around a lot. They move to different, maybe public housing. Some of our families have lived in homeless shelters. Some of them move in with auntie or grandma. And there's just a constant movement. If you move within 25 miles of where we start in downtown Chicago, we will stick with you. Our mentors spend a lot of time in their cars, and they will drive to see their kids if they're within that radius. If you move out of the Chicago area, we do our best to find another mentoring program, often another chapter of Friends of the Children, because we're building this national network. But there is nothing you can do to be kicked out of our program. Like you say, kids make mistakes. Parents make mistakes. Kids
Sure.
make mistakes. But just like I think we're all parents on this call, if your kid made a mistake, you didn't ditch them. You didn't leave them. You didn't kick them out of the house. You said, okay, we have a problem. How are we going to solve this problem?
Sure.
How are we going to bring in resources to help solve this problem? We also do a lot of evaluation and measuring and improvement. And, we, as an organization, we haven't gotten it right from the beginning either. So we spend a lot of time measuring the kind of impact that we've had in these kids' lives. Measuring, we have a structure, we have a program. It's not glorified babysitting. We have a program, we have things that our mentors work on with our children that are then measured constantly. So, for instance, we have 5 focus areas that we work on in the elementary years. Self-awareness and self-regulation. Can we teach a kid to self-regulate? A team of support. How can we find people in the community to support this child and this family that are not just the mentor? Is there somebody at your school who will also look out for you? Is there a pastor in your community who will also be part of your team of support? We talk a lot about goal setting so that every child working with their mentor will pick a goal. I really want to learn to ride a bike. I really want to learn to tie my shoes so I don't have to have anybody else do it for me. So that's the goal that the mentor is going to work on with the kid until they get it right. And sometimes it takes a really long time to learn to tie a shoe, and it teaches you a lot along the way. All those frustrations, all that resilience, like, I can't do it. And what do we do with our frustration? How do we go back and try again? Those are all really important things. We work a lot on literacy development as one of our focus areas. There are a lot of good things happening at the Chicago Public Schools, but not all the schools are teaching all our children how to read.
Right.
So imagine if you're a kid in school and you don't know how to read, and you get maybe promoted to the next year and the next year and the next year. Pretty soon, the fact that you can't read is going to make school really boring and really not part of your experience. What are you going to do? You're going to act out, you're going to drop out, you're going to check out.
Sure.
So literacy is so important. So we focus a lot. We have brought literacy in-house into our organization, and we have this rock star teacher, former Chicago Public School literacy teacher, who works full-time with our kids. and teaches our mentors how to mentor our kids about reading. Spend a lot of time on literacy and a lot of time on building independence. If you live in a family that's not helping you become a better person, then what can you do for yourself? Maybe mom can't get you to school on time. It's just for whatever reason, maybe she works nights, maybe she's not home in the morning when it's time to go to school. So what can the mentor do for the child to build independence? Maybe it's, I'm going to buy you an alarm clock so you can get up in the morning. Maybe I'm going to make you a checklist so that every morning you've packed your backpack, you've got your shoes, you've got your homework. What are those tools that the mentor can teach the child so that they can be independent? So those are the kinds of things that we do.
That's astounding. I mean, for somebody who didn't grow up in that environment, to think that there is somebody who will help you get to that place and help you get on track has got to be exceptional for those kids and for their families as they see the kids start to grow that independence and get the benefit of having all that mentoring. You talked about some fairly soft areas for measurement, and how do you measure some of those things, some of the items you talked about? Because certainly when we were talking about mentoring in other circumstances, there's a lot of soft skill stuff. It doesn't lend itself easily to measurement. So I'm interested in how you all approach measuring progress.
You focused on a problem. We are following a model that was developed over time by the national organization, and Friends of the Children operates across the country in very, very different communities. We're on a couple of Native American reservations, we're in rural areas, and we're in urban areas. And there are things about Chicago that are particularly hard, that the national model didn't quite work for us because of the nature of community violence and the nature of poverty and history of racism. And we can go on and on and on about what makes some Chicago neighborhoods really lacking in resources. But it's been part of our Chicago mission is to develop ways to measure success. We can measure long-term success. What happens when our kids are 18? Do they go to college or not? Have they had involvement with the juvenile justice system or not? Have they become parents as teenagers or not? But when we're measuring the early elementary and the middle school years, it's much harder to develop annual measurable outcomes.
Mm-hmm.
But we're still working on that. We can certainly measure the number of hours that the kid has with a mentor. We can certainly measure, did the youth in our program set a goal and make progress towards that goal? Did Joey learn to tie his shoes or not? Mm-hmm. That's something we can measure.
Sure.
The team of support we can measure. At the beginning of the year, this kid had nobody in the community besides the mentor. After a year in our program, now there's a pastor and the guy in the barbershop down the street checks on the kid every day on his way home from school. Those kinds of things we can measure. They're softer than test scores.
Sure.
We can measure reading skills. Literacy is something we can measure. I think when we started working on literacy in our program, about 70% of our kids were reading below grade level. And after 2 years of bringing literacy in-house and having the mentors incorporate literacy into every outing that they do with our kids, now more than half our kids are at grade level. And we've got kids who are way beyond grade level.
Wow.
So we have kids in our, can I tell you a story?
Please do.
So one of our previous board chair used to say to me, numbers numb and stories store. So if I tell you a story,
We'll remember it.
You'll remember. So we have a little girl in our program. She's been with us since the beginning. She missed 50 days of kindergarten because nobody could get her to school. She missed about that much of first grade, and somewhere around second, maybe it was third grade, the pandemic happened. She didn't go to school. So she went to school a little bit in third grade, fourth grade. After fourth grade, she didn't go to school anymore. She couldn't read. She was pretty frustrated. She was pretty angry. But she had a mentor who didn't give up. And this child is now in 8th grade. She's reading at a 9th grade level. She was part of our summer book club where she read the book and was leading discussion. She's back at school, and she's learned that she can't rely on anybody else to get her to school. So she's using all those independent skills to get up in the morning, to get dressed, to get organized, to get her homework in her backpack, and to get to school. And she's making friends. She's like a real seventh grader, eighth grader now. She's got all the ups and downs of everybody else. But I can just brag, without us, she would not be there. She would not.
It's frankly, listening to it, it's hard not to have an emotional response to that, making that kind of change in somebody.
It's sort of a joke at our board meetings. Like, if Jeannie doesn't cry, then we're not doing our job. Right? Because I grew up, I'm a little white girl from the suburbs. I grew up in a family that had, if we're going to measure, did you have enough money or not enough money? We had more than enough money. And we're working with kids who've experienced the kinds of trauma that most of us hope we never have to live through. And a lot of these kids, I think the term of art is adverse childhood experiences. The kids in our program have had terrible things happen to them by the time they're in kindergarten. The kid who had to hide in the bathtub during his birthday party because there was gunfire outside. The kids who lost parents to violence, who never knew their fathers, whose parents were incarcerated, whose parents became parents at 15. These are the, by the luck of the zip code, that's not me. So we are a small program.
Mm-hmm.
Right now there are 128 kids in our program in Chicago. We have just taken on 3 new mentors, which means we're going to bring in another 24 kids this spring, which is a long process about identifying children, training our mentors, building trust with the parents and caregivers so that they will accept us into their lives. But we're making a huge difference for those kids and those families, and for the teachers that teach them, and for the classmates that they have in school. So in some ways it feels very small, and in some ways it feels huge. And who knows, the girl I was telling you about, what's going to become of her? Is she going to be a teacher?
Right.
Is she going to know more about working in her community than anybody else? Is she going to mentor somebody else someday? So it's we are in it for the long haul, and that's what makes it really, really challenging and really, really special.
It's extraordinary.
Bill, Jeannie brought something up that I think is important that actually very much coincides with what we've talked about in a business setting as well. In that, Jeannie, what I heard you say is the Friends of the Children organizationally at the national level has a structure that you at the Chicago level had to mold to your unique circumstances. And I think, Bill, this is often why mentoring programs at an organizational level don't flourish, right? Why they often have issues, because if you do something at the national level or at an organizational level or at a company-wide level, but don't make it unique to your specific requirements, your specific needs at a division level, a department level, a chapter level, or whatever it might be down at a smaller unit level, then it's not going to work. And so, Jeannie, what I heard you talk about with Friends of the Children Chicago is that you have some very unique experiences that aren't common across all of the chapters nationally. And so you've had to change your metrics a little bit to consider what your children's experiences might be and how you can mold the model that has been provided to you from the national level to be successful for your children.
There's another level at which we adapt. Most of the chapters across the country have, in the last 5 or 6 years, have added a new position, which we call the FACES, the Family and Community Engagement Specialist. So we don't know everything about Chicago. We're not a food bank. We're not a job training program. We don't teach adult literacy. But we have these family and community engagement specialists whose full-time job it is to find resources for the families. So if you've got substance abuse in your family, we will find you a program. If you've got medical issues that aren't being addressed by your school or by your nurse practitioner, we'll try and find you other things. We have families who move into an apartment, they don't have any furniture. So we take them to the Chicago Furniture Bank, which then provides free furniture for their homes. So we're part of adapting the model to our local community through the kids and also through the families and the caregivers.
Mm-hmm.
But
You've
yeah,
talked a
one
lot.
size fits all doesn't fit all, right?
That's right. That's right. And you've talked a lot about the mentors and what they do for the children. I'm curious, have you been on a board before of a nonprofit?
No, I'm the one who never wanted to serve on the board of a nonprofit because I didn't want to go to meetings.
How's that working out?
Well, so my husband has been on nonprofit boards for 35 years, and I've watched him do it. And I said years ago, maybe someday I'll find something that captures my heart or that is worth going to meetings for, but I don't know, I haven't found it yet. And about 9 years ago, he was invited to a community meeting of people, philanthropists and public officials who had heard about Friends of the Children and wanted to talk about founding a chapter in Chicago. So I was actually in a show and couldn't go to the meeting, but my husband went to the meeting and he came home and he said, I think I found it. And I think you should go meet the executive director because she's a rock star and you should just go. So I had coffee with her and now I'm board chair. So it was a little longer process than that. I joined
Did
the
you
board.
become a board member and then board chair, or did you go straight to chairmanship?
No, there is no way I could have done that.
Okay.
I joined the founding board of the organization. So there were about 15 of us who said, yes, we want to spend time learning about this organization and giving our, what's the phrase, our time, our treasure, and our talent to support this nonprofit organization. Uh, and I learned that it's not that I hate meetings, I hate bad meetings. So I had to learn what makes a good meeting and how do you run a good meeting. Uh, we also have done a somewhat unique thing in our nonprofit. We have a board chair, but we sort of have a three-part chair. So we have a chair, and we have a past chair, and we have a future chair, vice chair, chair, and past chair. So as my former board chair would say, you're either preparing, chairing, or sharing. So I've been able to be mentored by the past chair and the current chair when I was vice chair to sort of learn the ropes to understand how we set an agenda for a meeting, how to read a budget, how to, are we going to have board meetings where committees report in? Over time we realized, nah, it's not so interesting. Let's have that, shorten that part of the meeting and make the bulk of the meeting a board roundtable where we have a question. What are we going to do about X? And we'll spend 20 minutes or half an hour with the whole board in the room, brainstorming, thinking, supporting the executive director in trying to generate new ideas, how to problem solve, how to find new sources of funding, those kinds of things. So it's been 8 years of learning, I guess 6 years of learning before I became board chair. Um, and it's been a challenge. I knew based on the mentoring model that I was going to need support to be board chair. So I think you talk about in your work having a board of directors around you to support you. So I called it my bench. That when I became board chair, I called about 5 friends who had board experience or fundraising experience, nonprofit experience of whatever kind I could find, and I would say, I'm about to be board chair, and I'm going to have a lot of questions along the way. Do you mind if I put you on my list? And can I call you? And people have been very generous with their time. And I'll call somebody and say, I got a problem. Can we have coffee? Can we meet on Zoom? I don't know how to deal with X. I don't know how to run an executive director evaluation. How do I evaluate the effectiveness of my executive director? How do I do that? How do I build board community? How do I work with board members who are drifting away? how do I find new board members? So I found my great bench who have been amazing. There also are resources out there. I didn't have to reinvent the wheel. I could always ask my husband, help, what am I doing now? But there's an organization called BoardSource, which has a huge online library. I think it's boardsource.com, which is just a great resource. What are the duties of a board chair? What does a board treasurer do? How do you run a meeting? How do you read a balance sheet? How do you, what are board responsibilities? What are staff responsibilities? And all these things are laid out in very clear language. So I've certainly gone back to that to think, how can I do a better job? How can I be a better mentee? So there are resources out there. If you want the pitch about why you should join a nonprofit board, I am more than happy to give you that.
Well, so I actually was headed for that because I would like that pitch. One thing that's become very clear is that you grabbed onto something that becomes sort of a passionate cause for you, something it's meaningful in your heart. And so if for folks who are looking to be on a nonprofit board, I've got to believe that has to be a huge part of that pitch that you're about to give us.
I think that's step one, and it's probably step 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 is find a cause, find an organization doing work you believe in, because it will take your time, it will take your talent, it will take your money, if you have it, to support and to participate. So yeah, step 1, find somebody doing work that grabs your heart, and make sure there are people there that you trust and respect, and because you're going to have to work together, you're going to have to solve problems. It has not been smooth sailing for Friends of the Children Chicago, and we've had to come together many times to solve problems. You better like those people and speak something of the same language. There's so much need in the world. I don't think it's hard to find a cause. It might be harder to find the combination of people. And I think I also just got really lucky. I'm sure we've had people come to our board with enthusiasm, and over time they say, board work is not for me, or they say, this cause doesn't quite grab my heart. If you believe in the ballet, go join the board of the ballet, and good on you, and go support the things that bring you joy. But for me, this has been a surprise, delight, and passion. It's been great.
And so you talked about having your board or your bench, excuse me, that you look to and ask questions. I'm curious, do you ask them ad hoc as things come up? Do you meet with them on a regular basis? How do you leverage your mentors?
It's been regular basis. I talk to my husband every day. So
that's positive. That's good.
Work.
Yeah.
Words to live by. Okay.
So he's on the bench. He's one of the 5.
He is definitely one of the, I think there are more than 5 at this point. The rest are much more ad hoc. I have a good friend who's been executive director of an organization, of a great education nonprofit for 25 years. And I have lunch with her probably every other month, just because we're really good friends and we like to hang out together. But I often come to lunch with a question. I don't know how often does the board chair check in with board members? And is it my job to make sure that everybody is contributing financially to the organization or not? And so we'll sit down over lunch and we'll talk about that. It's very informal. So I don't have a formal team meeting. I'm sure there are people who do, but that hasn't worked for me. Mm-hmm. I also think that the people on my bench are really busy, and I don't think they ever would have agreed to a monthly call. And they don't all know each other. They kind of are aware that they're part of my team, but it's a very informal structure.
Yeah. And then you've leveraged resources like the BoardSource, and we'll put all of this in the show notes, links to it. Are there any other resources that you can think of that help people learn how to be a part of a nonprofit or even run a board?
I think there's probably the Association of Small Foundations probably has a new name now. What's it called? Exponent Philanthropy, I think it's called. They run national conferences. That might be more on the giving side than on the receiving side. One thing that's been really helpful to me is to have a book list, things to read. So I certainly started, this is more on the subject area than on the board's
Right.
work. There's certainly a lot of books. I know that you're a big fan of the 7 Habits.
We've heard that.
There's certainly books about organizations and about nonprofits, but what's been more helpful to me is to get into the subject area, to read about brain science, because we talk a lot with our mentors about working with kids who are stuck in their downstairs brain, they're stuck in their fight or flight system because of the kinds of trauma that they've lived through, and how do we help regulate dysregulated kids, and how do we get them into their upstairs brain where they can use their cognitive sense and not their reflex.
Be more creative. Yeah.
Exactly. So there's a writer named Nadine Burke Harris who's written a lot about trauma and the brain in children. Reading her book has been great. The founder of Friends of the Children, Duncan Campbell, wrote a book about his experience. That's been really wonderful. Both he and Nadine have TED Talks, which are worth watching about. So digging into the subject matter has helped me be a better board member.
Well, it sounds like you've leveraged your bench a lot, and I love the fact that Friends of the Children have essentially an inherent transition plan that supports mentoring the chair and then the next chair inherently as part of your infrastructure. That seems like if only every team could do something like that, that would be incredible. And it sounds like you've just been so involved in, and you found what it is that your heart has led you to in service and in getting advice from folks and getting mentoring from people, as well as being the venue that children have mentors as part of their young life in growing into the precipice of adulthood. I just really want to thank you for sharing all of your experiences with us on what Friends of the Children do, how mentorship and mentoring young kids really supports the children there in Chicago. And while you feel like it's a small number, I'm sure the butterfly effect that's happening with those children and the new ones that are coming on board this spring are just incredible and will be a generational change. Thank you for sharing your experiences with us. Bill has spoken so highly of you, and so we're just so grateful to have you as part of our podcast. We sincerely appreciate you being so generous with your time and sharing such valuable lessons from your own mentorship experiences. Bill, did you want to add anything?
Well, so in full disclosure, I've learned a lot more about some of this work that Jeannie's doing during the podcast here. And I just have to applaud how exceptional what you're doing is and how desperately it's needed. But the work that you're doing, just like Angela indicated, okay, yeah, you're not doing it for millions of kids. You're doing it for a little bit over 100 kids. But the growth potential for those children now that they didn't have before is nothing short of extraordinary. Mm-hmm. And it's got to make you proud. Like I said, it's tough not to have an emotional reaction to what you're doing for those kids. And so thanks for being on the podcast, but thank you very much for what you're doing for those children. That's really very, very special.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure to be your guest.
Absolutely. Thank you for listening to this episode of Mentoring in Real Life. If you have thoughts or questions, feel free to leave us a comment or send us an email, which we've included in the show notes. If you liked what you heard, please subscribe, rate the podcast, and share with a friend. Until next time, help others climb.